Thanks again, and welcome to our session on turning follow-up reports and visits into opportunities for improvement. If you've seen this session before, you'll notice a slight change in the title, and that's because today we want to emphasize that this process, follow-up that is, and monitoring is one that can help an institution to improve and continually improve its processes. We'd like to also recognize that we're joined today or sponsored today by Instructure. Before we move on, I do want to call your attention to the fact that this is being recorded and you can be provided with a copy of the recording after the fact, but we do ask you not to make your own recordings or otherwise reproduce this presentation in any way. Once again, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Instructure. Instructure is an education technology company dedicated to helping everyone learn together. They amplify the power of teaching and elevate the learning process, leading to improved student outcomes. Today, Instructure supports more than 30 million educators and learners at more than 6,000 organizations around the world. Thank you very much, Instructure, for your sponsorship of today's event. The contributors to this session are myself, Dr. Melissa Harden, Lead Vice President for Institutional Field Relations, and my colleague, Dr. Terrence Peavy, Vice President for Institutional Field Relations. We'll be taking turns throughout the presentation. We do want to hear from you at the end of our presentation, but at any time, if you have a question you'd like to pose for us to answer, feel free to use the Q&A function that you see here. Pose your question, and at the end of the time that we have together, we'll make a pause and look at those questions and answer those for you today. Our learning goals today are to distinguish the types of follow-up which may be requested by a commission action, to identify reporting requirements included on commission accreditation action, to prepare and submit an effective follow-up report, to utilize the evidence expectations by standards, which is of course a new document that went into effect on July 1st of this year, to identify appropriate evidence to support the narrative report, and to recognize opportunities for improvement related to the 14th edition of the Standards for Accreditation and Requirements of Affiliation. Many of you will be aware that the 14th edition of our standards went into effect on July 1, 2023. A few additional learning goals for today: determine the steps and activities that will occur leading up to and during a follow-up visit, collaborate with the team chair and institutional stakeholders to prepare for the follow-up visit, conduct an effective follow-up visit, and understand what may happen after a follow-up visit and review come to an end. A report as an opportunity for improvement. We recognize that institutions don't desire to have follow-up or go into monitoring, but we also have seen in the relationships that we have with our many member institutions that follow-up can in fact be just the thing an institution needs to learn and to improve its processes. So first, we'd like to point out that the team reports that you get at the end of a follow-up visit or an evaluation visit or any other kind of visit would include or could include commendations, recognition of what the institution is doing well, collegial advice, which could be suggestions for the institution to consider in its ongoing continuous improvement processes, recommendations that the institution would need to respond to by taking action, and of course, requirements that could indicate non-compliance. So those would be actions that an institution would need to take to demonstrate it is in fact in compliance. Our commission actions identify a number of areas as well. Those recommendations that I referenced a moment ago, requirements, like we talked about just a second ago, that would be needed for the institution to demonstrate, in fact, that it has achieved or reached compliance. And together, those items point the way to continuous improvement for the institution. We said a moment ago that most institutions don't look forward to having follow-up or having to do reporting of this kind. And in fact, they may find it difficult to understand how a team or how the commission reached a conclusion that it did that led to action on the part of the institution. But we have had considerable feedback from institutions that say that in many ways, the exercise of going through follow-up, needing to demonstrate compliance, needing to produce new or more effective or more exemplary evidence does in fact allow the institution to take a look at itself and see where they can make improvements in processes and where they can clarify or make it more evident to an external audience how they are meeting or exceeding those standards and requirements of affiliation. We have here a couple of pieces of information you can take a look at. We're moving on here then to the accreditation review cycle and monitoring. You're all familiar with the 8-year cycle of self-study evaluation visits. We, as of this year, are no longer using the midpoint peer review, which used to appear in the middle of the cycle. And instead, the annual institutional update features more prominently as an ongoing and frequent measure of oversight and monitoring of institutions. Of course, other forms of follow-up or monitoring can arise as the need arises. And so that's where we're really focusing our attention today. There are several reasons why an institution may be asked to submit a follow-up report, and we'd like to kind of highlight those for you here. Number one, an institution might have been found to be out of compliance and needs to demonstrate that it can take measures and show that it's taking important and meaningful steps toward demonstrating that it has in fact reached a level of achievement of compliance that's satisfactory. In another case, an institution could have been reaffirmed previously after a non-compliance action, and the commission needs assurance that the activities that were planned or ongoing are in fact sustainable and they will continue to show improvements for the institution. A couple of other reasons why an institution might be asked to submit a follow-up report include number one, a monitoring activity such as the AIU I mentioned a moment ago, or self-study evaluation identified areas of concern that need to be addressed. And perhaps some other concern has been raised, for example, a media report or some other piece of information has come to light that calls into question the institution's compliance with a particular standard or requirement. Those kinds of things could prompt some kind of reporting. Let's pause first to celebrate that this year we've inaugurated the 14th edition of the Standards for Accreditation and Requirements of Affiliation. The nomenclature for the standard remains the same, but there are important distinctions in this 14th edition that you'll want to pay close attention to. Follow-up can be required for any of the standards or ROAs, but the bolded standards that we saw a little bit before, that is Standard 5, Educational Effectiveness Assessment, and Standard 6, Planning, Resources, and Institutional Improvement, are not unusual in commission actions. And so that might be an area where your institution needs to focus some of its efforts. The requirements of affiliation that used to number 15 in the 13th edition of the standards and ROAs, 11 of those ROAs have been integrated within the standards. 4 remain, nevertheless. Those 4 remain as requirements of affiliation, and they're called out separately. So you can see those here on the screen. And then just for an illustration to familiarize yourself with where did those other 11 requirements of affiliation go, you can see here in the crosswalk, for example, that ROA number 7 is now found under Standard 1, Mission and Goals, and so forth. So you'll be able to find them. They didn't go anywhere. They just found a home to better align with our standards. A new document we mentioned a few moments ago is the Evidence Expectations by Standard document, which also went into effect on July 1 of this year. This document very clearly outlines the various pieces of evidence and information that an institution should or must include in its reporting. We do, however, note that there are a few items that may not apply to all institutions. So be sure to reference this document whenever you're doing any kind of follow-up so that you can see that guideline and that practical advice about what to include to better state and demonstrate that your institution is either in compliance or coming into compliance. So I'm going to pause and ask Dr. Peavy to continue on for a few more moments.
Thank you, Dr. Harden. Let's take a look at the types of follow reports and sample actions. Now I would like to review with you the various types of follow-up reports. We have out-of-cycle supplemental information reports, supplemental information reports, recommendation responses with the annual institutional update, and monitoring reports and follow-up team visits. A supplemental information report may be requested for reasons that lie outside of the prior or regular accreditation action. For example, if the commission receives information, be it from a media or other source, that raises concern about the institution's ongoing compliance with commission standards for accreditation, requirements of affiliation, policies and procedures, and/or applicable federal regulatory requirements, the commission may request a supplemental information report to determine the veracity of the original cause for concern. A supplemental information report may be requested when a programmatic accreditor issues an action that raises concern about an institution's ongoing compliance with commission standards for accreditation, requirements of affiliation, policies and procedures, and/or applicable federal regulatory requirements. The type of action shown here calls for an out-of-cycle supplemental information report. That does not result from a regular accreditation cycle activity, such as a self-study or an AIU. The institution receives a letter from the commission liaison, and that letter will go to the CEO and the ALO of an institution. The letter to the institution will include more details. The language simply states that the staff has acted on behalf of the commission, that a report has been requested, and a deadline set, as well as a particular standard or requirement of affiliation for the matter that it's regarding. It does not refer to any specific criteria because the information has not yet been received or evaluated to make a determination, if at all. You'll have to refer to the confidential letter to understand the specific areas of concern. Now let's take a look at another type of SIR, or supplemental information report. An SIR can be requested after regular accreditation activities when the institution is found to be in compliance, but the commission needs further evidence that the institution is carrying out activities that are planned or newly implemented. An SIR may be directed following an accreditation activity such as evaluation or another supplemental report. In these cases, the language specifies the prior activity that prompted the new supplemental information report, as well as specific areas within the standard or requirement affiliations that should be included in the report. Finally, the language that indicates if a follow-up team visit may or will follow the submission of the report. Recommendation and responses with the AIU refers to a commission directed for an institution to provide narrative responses to recommendations made in a previous accreditation action. Remember that recommendations are binding and must be acted upon. The commission action language will specifically state to request that beginning of the year and in conjunction with the annual institutional update that the institution provide further evidence of the identified standard. The action stipulates when the first update should be submitted and the topics that it should cover. Only recommendations issued by the commission using the language above should be reported on at the time of the AIU. In this example, the specific item mentioned related to Standard 3, design and delivery of the student learning experience. This one may only result from a self-study where the institution's accreditation is reaffirmed. However, the evaluation process identifies concerns for ongoing compliance in certain areas, so more information is needed. Here is another type, a monitoring report. The term monitoring is only used in association with non-compliance action, which, as you know, could be warning, probation, or show cause. The action language calls for a monitoring report, which is the term used in association with non-compliance action, such as warning, probation, and show cause. This language requests a monitoring report, indicates the due date, and specifies the type of evidence to be provided to demonstrate that, quote, that the institution has achieved and can sustain ongoing compliance with Standard 3 and Standard 6, close quote. If applicable, an action of this sort may include reference to policies and procedures for which evidence of compliance is needed. The action language here breaks down the type of evidence needed for each standard or requirement affiliation. Again, if you should refer to the standardized recommendation requirement document available on our website to see if the items shown here in the action language are taken from there. The item directs a follow-up team visit. This is a different type of visit with a special name, similar to a focus team visit. A monitoring report always includes a mandatory follow-up visit. All non-compliance action includes a commission liaison guidance visit. These visits serve to help the institution understand Middle States Commission on Higher Education expectations and provides guidance to respond effectively to the commission action. The commission liaison guidance visit focuses on the specific items indicated in the commission action. These visits are also an opportunity to educate the institution's community about the action and its implications for the institution's accreditation status, as well as what is being asked of the institution. Finally, depending on the nature of the action, this type of visit may include other staff or commission representatives. Now I will pass it off to Dr. Harden.
Thank you, Dr. Peavy. So we're going to take a quick look at recommendation responses, which is a little bit different form of reporting. So these annual responses are designed to be iterative. Think of it as a form of check-in in between cycles. Depending on the interval and the institution's progress, there may be more or less to report on at any given point. But the goal here is to respond fully to the recommendations by the end of the cycle to demonstrate progress. So this would be the kind of an action that came from the commission where you were asked to respond to specific recommendations within standards in the context of that annual institutional intake. And so that would be open for you in the portal and you would submit those responses. Even though these are brief responses, there is an expectation that you've done consideration, you've created systems and processes in place, and you're able to demonstrate that you're fully able to respond and demonstrate compliance with these various actions. If you do have questions about submitting recommendations, responses, be sure to reach out to your Middle States Vice President Liaison. These recommendation responses should consist of just 1 to 3 paragraphs. It's a limit of 1,000 words or 6,000 characters. So short responses, short and sweet, targeted to the point that's being made there in that particular recommendation. And please note that in this type of reporting, it's not possible to upload evidence or hyperlinks with the submission. So again, the focus here is on a targeted, succinct response to a particular recommendation. Now let's take a look at that follow-up report and how to submit responses to specific recommendations. So we're often asked, well, what is the template? Is there a template for us to submit this report? And there's really not a specific template, but there are specific expectations. So number 1, you should include a cover page. You should include an introduction, no more than 5 pages. And then the body of the report really should be a narrative with analysis, not just description, but an analysis of what the issues are, what the steps are that the institution has taken to understand the issues, to create forms of response to the issues, and even assessment of the effectiveness of that particular response that's been taken. There can also be up to 5 pages of conclusion. And as we said just a moment ago, evidence is not submitted through the portal in the way that it would be in a normal SIR. Here, the evidence is included in a single PDF document for those out-of-cycle SIRs and put together as an appended part of the materials. Another question that we hear fairly frequently is, do I need to address all the criteria in the standards cited by the commission action? It's a really good question because, in fact, in the portal, when you go to upload your responses, you may find that there are criteria included with open text boxes that were not necessarily called out in the commission action. And this is what prompts the question frequently. Keep in mind that if an institution is found to be out of compliance with a particular criterion, it's actually the entire standard that's considered out of compliance. So wherever it's relevant, our suggestion would be that you do consider the full body, the full breadth of that standard in your response, so that you're really putting in context those specific areas that were called out in the larger view of the overall standard. Here are the things that your follow-up report should accomplish. Essentially, it's the same that a self-study should achieve. That is, a focus on what you're doing, not what you hope to do in the future. Include systematic evidence, demonstrate consistency across all levels, modalities, locations, etc. Be sure to read the standard to show consistency across the institution. The future should only be used in terms of sustainability of measures taken. Emphasize what you've already implemented. And what we mean by structure to ensure sustainability is, have you identified who is responsible for doing these activities or taking these measures over time? Do you have an assessment office or a committee? Do you engage in professional development for faculty? How do you ensure ongoing engagement? Think through these questions as you prepare your reporting. Be sure to do a thorough and detailed analysis for the benefit of the reader. Rather than providing raw data alone, explain how can you make meaning out of these data. Include a commentary on what it demonstrates and why it's relevant to the specific area that you're reporting on. Integrate it into the narrative of the report while providing essential context, so that the outside reader, who may not have all of the context of your institution, can fully appreciate its significance in the body of your report. So what type of evidence is useful? Provide evidence that what you say you do, you are in fact doing in an ongoing and sustained way. Show how you document your decisions and actions and how they are informed. Be sure to label your evidence clearly so that it can easily be found by the external readers or evaluators. And then a rule of thumb, focus on the past and the present, not the future, unless you're really talking about sustainability of the measures you've put in place. Now, here, that evidence expectations by standard document really is important. These guidelines that we mentioned earlier as a companion document for the 14th edition of the Standards of Accreditation and Requirements of Affiliation. Under the appropriate standard, you'll find the list of required evidence for each criterion. Be sure to reference this document as you prepare your report. The evidence expectations may include a wide variety of documents, including but not limited to written documentation or approvals, sample materials, publications or communications, policy and procedures, quantitative data, tables or charts, written reports, trend data reports, or qualitative data reports on surveys. Pay close attention to all the evidence listed in this document, as the team or commission reader will review the evidence accompanying your report with these guidelines in mind. So there's an expectation you want to be able to meet. Note also that in some cases, the evidence expectations clearly indicate the time period to be reported. That's a question we hear a lot as well. How much time should be included, or what duration of time should we be reporting on? For example, the evidence expected for Standard 5, Criterion 3 is an analysis of 4 years of student achievement data disaggregated by relevant populations to help interpret educational effectiveness assessment results or summaries. Also, keep in mind the external readers and their role and responsibility. Respect the peer reviewers and their time and attention. Dr. Peavy will now talk about the follow-up visit. Dr. Peavy.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. This section is for those of you that have a follow-up visit. As we stated before, not all follow-up reports require a visit. So if your commission action does not mention a visit, you submit your report and your part is done. Follow-up visits may be required for certain kinds of follow-up reports and may be requested for other types of reports. We schedule the deadline to ensure that all the steps can be completed in time for the related committee meeting, not the commission meeting, which is usually about a month before the committee meeting. The team may request additional information before or during the team visit. The team may request evidence during an in-person visit, and the institution will have up to 7 days to provide it. But if you want to provide what you can in advance, sometimes you provide materials in person and then follow up with a virtual submission. All materials must be submitted online. Here's where we mention the submission of materials after the visit. That really only happen when a visit takes place in person. We do not recommend that you email documents to the team, but rather upload the materials in the portal under the section for additional documents. The team will tell you if they want anything else. You are responsible for uploading what they request. We assign the team in accordance to our policies. The number of team members is no less than 2, but maybe more depending on the number of standards at issue. For example, if you're cited for standard 6, and usually it's a chief financial officer who is assigned to that standard. And if you're cited for standard 3, it may be a faculty member. Or if you're cited for standard 4, you'll be an expert on student affairs, etc. And for follow-up teams, usually the vice president liaison may accompany the team in support of the institution and the team. This means 1 day of interviews, and the next morning is the oral exit report. Your vice president liaison will contact you and say that these are the dates that we're considering. Usually the vice president coordinates with the institution, and then the vice president finds a team chair and members, and when the date is finalized. Peer evaluators interview campus constituencies according to the issues cited. For example, standard 2 would be standard 2 for, say, Title IX policies and procedures. They would want to meet with the Title IX coordinator. If cited for standard 4, they would want to meet with the registrar, admissions, support services, etc., and not individuals who are not associated with these matters. Visits serve to confirm and verify what institutions claim in their follow-up reports. Please note that this is not a social call. No social events are expected or allowed. In terms of follow-up visit schedule, 1 day visit starting with the president or CEO. Also governing boards, especially if cited for standard 7. As many representatives as possible from the governing board are expected. It is okay for the governing board to meet via Zoom or some other video conferencing because in most cases, boards of trustees are not local. Depending on the standard, the team may meet with different individuals and groups. That evening, as usual, the team will put together the report, and on the second day, the team will meet with the CEO/president and give them a heads up and before the oral report is given. The institution decides who is invited to the oral report. We hope that you will invite as many people as possible, and certainly the key people. Please don't underestimate the value of the institutional response. Take it seriously. It is a step in the process that gives you an opportunity to respond to the team's findings. It should be brief, targeted, and useful. It is not to correct the team. It's not to correct what the team has concluded. It is your chance to say why you think you're in compliance and how you're responding. It is also an opportunity to acknowledge the expertise of the team. Thank them for their work. It is not an opportunity to provide additional documentation. It's too late for that, and it won't be accepted at this point. But if something else new happens in a few days since the visit, you may include that, but only if it's from after the team is left. This section is for those of you, this is the peer review and staff support. This section is for those of you who will have a follow-up visit. As we stated before, not all follow-up reports require a visit. So if your commission action does not mention a visit, you submit your report and your part is done. This is a reminder that we have a 3-part process. In this case of a follow-up report, regardless of what prompts them to be directed, it unfolds in the order presented in this slide. 3 tiers of review led by peers. Each conducts its own review, but the latter 2 depend on the first. So it's critical that you include in your written reports all documentation and evidence for others to review, without the benefit of the visit and interviews. The first and fundamental level of peer review is the peer review team. The team reads the follow-up report and any evidence submitted and uses them as primary sources. The team may or may not conduct a follow-up visit to the institution. By the way, when follow-up visits take place, the Vice President Commission Liaison may or may not accompany the team. The Committee on Follow-up Activities conducts its own review, but starts with a team report. The Commission makes the final decision and acts on the institution's accreditation, but the point of departure is the action proposed by the Committee on Evaluation Reports, which is grounded in the team's findings. In the case of a monitoring report for noncompliance, even if you're reaffirmed afterwards, there's always a follow-up monitoring report after you're reaffirmed, like a bookend. An SIR, on the other hand, may trigger another SIR, or ideally, it ends with a commission action that simply acknowledges receipt and does not add any other follow-up. The multi-level decision-making process ensures consistency, equity, and fairness across all reviews. We're here for you. Your Vice President Liaison is available by email, phone, and video conference. You may request virtual meetings with us. You can initiate, for a separate fee, an institutional requested campus visit if you choose. We want to remind you that we are not evaluators and cannot review drafts, but we can talk to you about your process. We only provide feedback for self-study designs during the self-study prep visits. In the case of follow-up, we can engage in conversations. This concludes our formal part of the presentation. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. We want to just let you know that we would love to have you at our annual conference that is happening in Philadelphia this December, the 4th through the 6th. This 3-day event offers exceptional plenary sessions, more than 30 concurrent sessions, presentations during the breakfast for presidents, provosts, and accreditation liaison officers, student poster session, networking opportunities in exhibit hall, as well as pre-conference workshops as a launch to the conference. You can register today by visiting our website, msche.org/annual-conference. We look forward to seeing you in December. Also, as we close, we would like to again thank our sponsor, Instructure, for supporting today's webinar. If you would like to receive more information about Instructure, please scan the QR code on the screen and complete the form that opens. We'd also like to acknowledge and thank Instructure for their platinum sponsorship of the 2023 annual conference. Thank you, Instructure. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please visit our website and follow us on social media. You will receive an email for the video link in approximately 1 week. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Good afternoon.